Once in the Americas, slaves were sold by auction to the person that bid the most money for them. It was here that family members would find themselves split up, as a bidder may not want to buy the whole family, only the strongest, healthiest member. Slave auctions were advised when it was known that a slave ship was due to arrive. Posters would be displayed around town. When the slave ship docked, the slaves would be taken off the ship and placed in pens. They would be washed and their skin covered with grease or something tar to make them look healthier. Once this was done, they would fetch as much money as possible. They would also be branded with a hot iron to identify themselves as slaves. There were two main types of slave auctions: those that were sold to the highest bid and grab-and-go auctions.
Slave 365, come out! Comes up. Let me check your bag. Let's go! I want it. 372, come out! How much for this one?
She comes in a pack with the other one. 800.
800, huh? I'll take it.
385, come out!
Hands up. Turn around. No. Don't want her.
What do you mean no? They come as a set.
She came out coughing. She's sick. I don't want her.
Please, sir, they're my sisters.
You're no use to me. No.
Take all three or take none at all.
Fine. Go away.
There is two ways in which a man can be enslaved. One is through force. He can be penned behind fences, guarded constantly, punished severely for breaking the slightest rule, and made live in constant fear. The second is to teach him to think that his own best interest was severed by doing what his master wishes him to do. He can be taught that he is inferior, and that only through slavery he will eventually rise to the level of his master. The Sultan slave owner used both. The first was the way of the whip, the threat of the auction block, and the murder. Its aim was to make the slave live in constant fear. The second way was much more suitable. It aimed was to brainwash the slave, to destroy his mind, and replace him with the mind of the master.
I don't want to work anymore. I'm so tired. Why didn't he give us any breaks? It's literally raining. I don't want to do this no more. Why do we get treated like this?
What are you doing? Get to work! Let's go! Get to work! What are you doing?
The Underground Railroad, a vast network of people who helped fugitive slaves escape to the North and to Canada, was not run by a single organization or person. Rather, it consisted of many individuals, many whites, but predominantly black, who knew only the local efforts to aid fugitives and not of the overall operation. Still, it effectively moved hundreds of slaves networks each year. According to one estimate, the South lost 100,000 slaves between 1810 and 1850.
Where are you guys going? Go, 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 go!
Harriet Tubman is the most widely recognized symbol of the Underground Railroad. When she escaped on September 17, 1849, Tubman was aided by members of the Underground Railroad. To her, freedom felt empty, unless she could share it with the people she loved. So she resolved to go back and rescue family and friends. Harriet was nicknamed Moses by abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison. The name was used as an analogy to the biblical story of Moses who attempted to lead the Jews of the Promised Land and free them to slavery. According to Sarah Hopkins Bradford, it is impossible to give accurate dates of her different journeys, as she had no idea of the dates or the order in which they were made. Rosa Parks died October 24, 2005, in Detroit, Michigan. African-American civil rights activist who refused to move from her seat on a public bus to a white man precipitated the 1955 through 1956 Montgomery bus boycott in Alabama, which is recognized as the spark that ignited the U.S. civil rights movement.
Can't believe we're finally free.
No.
We can be treated like free men. What is that?
No Negroes allowed.
Why do we get treated like this? I thought we were free men.
Apparently not.
Wait, look.
We're allowed in here.
Let's go. Cut it.
Jim Crow laws were state and local laws that enforced racial segregation in the South United States. All were enacted in the late 19th and early 20th century by white Democratic-dominated state legislators after the Reconstruction period. The laws were enforced until 1965. In practice, Jim Crow laws mandated racial segregation in all public facilities in the states of the former Confederate States of America. Started in the 1870s and 1880s and were upheld in the 1896 by the U.S. Supreme Court's separate but equal legal doctrine for facilities for African Americans.
Can you believe it? Can you believe that we're here?
It's a miracle. We're free.
We're free, finally. Can you believe that we're sitting in the front?
No, I really can't. I have to go to the restroom.
The Annals of Congress states that the law was approved on February 12, 1793. The act was straightened at the instance of the slavery states of the South by the Compromise of the 1850, which required even the governments and the residents of free states to enforce the capture and return of fugitive slaves. This was known as the Fugitive Slave Act or Fugitive Slave Law.
Who are they? They can't be sitting in the front. You can't be here. No, yes, but what's that?
I'm allowed to be here.
No, you're not. Out.
No.
Either you stay or you leave.
No, I want to stay here.
What happened? I've been looking everywhere for you.
They kicked me out.
What do you mean they kicked you out?
Because we're not as free as we thought we were.
That's so stupid.
We're not as free as the white men are.
Martin Luther King Jr. was a social activist and Baptist minister who played a key role in the American Civil Rights Movement from the mid-1950s into his assassination in the 1960s. King sought equality, and human rights for African Americans, the economically disadvantaged, and all victims of injustice throughout peaceful protest. He was a driving force behind watershed events such as the Montgomery bus boycott and the 1963 March on Washington, which helped bring about such landmark legislation as the Civil Rights Acts and the Voting Rights Acts. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 and is remembered each year on Martin Luther King Day as a U.S. federal holiday since 1986.